Assalamu alaikum. All praise to Allah. We are together again on behalf of Imam Tariq El-Amin, resident Imam of Masjid Al-Taqwa, the Talim Committee, Chair Dr. Aisha El-Amin, the committee members Dr. Lionel Allen Jr., myself, Rashida Fitzpatrick, and Dr. Gloria. I want to welcome you to today's Talim. Today's Talim is going to be a discussion about African American Muslims with our guest speaker, Dr. Aminah Al-Deen. I'll tell you a little about our speaker. Dr. Al-Deen is a Marathi professor of Islamic Studies in the Department of Religious Studies at DePaul University. In 2006, she founded the nation's only undergraduate baccalaureate program in Islamic World Studies. She studied Arabic and Maliki Islamic Studies in Sudan, Morocco, and Islamic civilizations at the Sorbonne. She is the former editor and chief of the Journal of Islamic Law and Amp Culture. Her book publications include History of Arab Americans, Exploring Diverse Roots, African American Islam, Questions of Faith, Transnational Muslim in America, Introduction to Islam in the 21st Century, Global Muslims and Muslim Ethics in the 21st Century, and Islam, Muslims, and COVID-19. Dr. El-Deen is a Fulbright Scholar, a board member of the Institute for Muslim Mental Health, an advisory board member of Zakat Nation, an executive board member of Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network, a senior editor for Oxford Research Publication, and the American editor for the Muslim Minorities in the Muslim series for Brill Publishers. She has hosted the talk show Critical Talk for Sound Vision for the past 4 years and is currently the project director for Black American Muslim International for the Abu Suleiman Center at George Mason University. There will be time at the end of our presentation for questions and answers. Feel free to use the raise hand function or submit questions or comments in the chat. Also, Taqwa family, please mute yourself if you are not speaking to help avoid background noise. Before we begin, please note that today's Talim, as well as all past and future Talims and cookbots, are available the Masjid Al-Taqwa YouTube channel. If you have not already, please subscribe. I open up the floor to you, Dr. El-Deen. We're ready for your conversation.
Very short. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everybody who is listening. I see one of my let me just say this real quick, Rashida. People are in the waiting room. You have to let them in.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's popping up on my screen.
Oh, okay.
A very and salams to Bill, who is one of my young, older students who's on right now. Salam alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Doctor. To one of the best professors we've ever had.
That hair has gotten grayer and the beard longer. Okay. I thought I would talk about the book just as a backdrop of current research, because I'm working on a second edition to this volume. This book, as you know, is 30 years old. So happy anniversary to the book. Still primary sources that put all of the communities, and there are quite a large number, and that hasn't changed over time, in the same place. And I'm trying to encourage folk to do that. Hasn't happened. I was in graduate school when I started working on this book, working on my dissertation, teaching classes, and new to DePaul University at the same time. So I myself, I think, would have written a better book if I had had room to breathe. But I learned in writing, putting this together, to listen carefully and to not discredit information nor positions of the people I was interviewing, nor of the articles that I was reading. And I kind of resolved to tell the stories of each community as best I could, about their interpreted beliefs and practices, without any subject or summary judgments on my part. I had to come to terms with information that interviewees found confidential, because people were quick to slap. I'm just saying this to you, but I don't want you to write about this. And I'm saying, oh, but this is so good. I discovered then, 30 years ago, and also today in my work with Abu Suleiman Center, that most communities are islands unto themselves, with their own coded language, with their own particular beliefs and things they hold in esteem. And they're also fighting some what is normally called existential, but they're fighting depictions of the African American community, and outside of themselves, but on them. It's a lot of little ideological wars going on. I was surprised when I wrote this book to learn that because I'm Muslim, many communities were suspicious. Had I been white and non-Muslim, or probably even Black and non-Muslim, communities would not have been suspicious. But because I was Muslim, they were suspicious, because it became an issue of what community do you belong to? And that is back to everybody sitting in their island, and they have criteria of loyalty to the philosophy of the group. Loads of people have used this book. Communities, African American communities have not, but loads of my colleagues across the country who talk about religion in America, who talk about African American religion in America, and there are very few courses on Islam in America. But in those, and I met Bill in one of those, have used this book forever. I'm, a testament to that is I'm still receiving royalties, and across Europe. So it's been an interesting journey. This is, and I thank Dr. Aisha and soon to be Dr. Tariq El-Amin for inviting me here, because this is the very first opportunity that I have to discuss this book with a Muslim community. I've discussed it all over the world, but not here. Not here in our communities, I'll put it like that. Because I've discussed it in immigrant communities, I've discussed it in universities, but this is the first time in a community. I am so happy. If I could jump up and down, I would, but I can't jump up and down anymore. So I'll just say, thank you very much. And it's going to be a conversation. I'm retired, and Rashida had difficulty with, I'm an emeritus professor, meaning I'm retired and as a full professor, but I only teach in Sao Paulo's Freedom School in the summer and lecture when invited, but that's it. So, talk to me. Don't be quiet, please. I left those quiet days at DePaul.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Aminah.
Alaikum salam.
So, when you said that you've received more resistance and suspicion from the Muslim community, are there particular segments of the community in terms of did that suspicion kind of go along the lines of ethnicity, or was it, madhab, or maybe even just kind of geographic location?
Well, it was specific. No, it was all of the communities, because I didn't belong to any of them. In order to research all of them, I couldn't belong to any of them. And what I found was that, and this was remarkable, and I'm writing about it a little bit now, each community has its own lexicon, its own language. And if you don't speak that language, they immediately know that you're not of them. It wasn't geographic location, because I was all over the place. I think the kindest people to me were Imam Farrakhan and Imam Warfi Muhammad. They were the kindest. It's like, who are you and what are you trying to do, girl? And they understood what I was talking about the resistance in their communities. Because there was a thought that if you're not of the community, you're going to get something wrong. We can't let you talk to the community because you may say something that is against our ideology. So it's interesting, but not geographic location. The immigrant community largely has kind of decided that I'm anti-immigrant, which is not true. But I am so pro-African-American Islam that they find that bothersome.
I think, yeah, you got one in the chat, Dr.
Aisha. I have a question. She asks, can you please talk a bit about the information you shared in your book for those unfamiliar with it?
I got it from members of each community. I had to pare it down because as a new professor scholar, I wouldn't have even called myself a scholar back in those days. One of the things that was happening, nobody, and I didn't take anthropology, I only took Islamic studies. And in Islamic studies, there are no methodologies. They are not there. It's not something people embrace. So I found myself really treading water and not doing well, trying to figure out, an interview that was supposed to have been 45 minutes turned into 2 hours. And so I had all of this stuff, and I'm saying, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't put all of this in a book, and how to pare it down to get the salient stuff that I needed to talk about each community. I know one of the things that happened was in the book, I really began to look at the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And what I found was startling. And when I talked about him as an American philosopher, unheralded, my other colleagues tried to jump down my throat with both feet. Mm-hmm. And I don't do well when you try to do that. All my hackles come up, and I'm saying, oh, so you're trying to tell me that an African-American Muslim can't be on par with these folk you're calling American philosophers? But I kind of thought, and even more so now, that the initial efforts of Black folk who embraced Islam were not fully looked at, because they were going against what was permissible for African Americans, both Christianity and lifestyle and a number of other things. And so what these men, Elijah Muhammad, Sheikh Dawood Faisal, and Prophet Noble Drew Ali were doing with their abilities was not analyzed correctly. I'll put it like that. Because you can't transform a vessel until you clean it out. And all of them had ideas about how one does that. Hopefully, Tarek, in a roundabout way, I got to what you were asking.
No, that was Dr. Aisha's question, but I to my estimation, that was great.
Dr. Aisha, did I get to you? Where are you? She's somewhere. Okay.
She's here. She's around.
Bill, I don't think Rashida is very familiar with the format. So, Bill, just unmute yourself and talk.
Yeah.
Rashida, don't worry about it. I just got familiar with the format a minute ago.
Okay.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum again. I was more thinking back to when I took your course in I guess it was African American experience with Islam, and obviously coming from the white community, I certainly didn't know anything about the history of Black Muslims and all the different formations that took when I started in your group or your class. And one of the things that I noticed, and I did use your more than one of your books, but certainly that one. Particularly at the point, I should explain for people here is that my initial writing for Dr. Aminah is that I wrote a paper about Muslim Black Muslims in films, basically, and did analysis of that. And one of the conclusions I came to was that the idea of Black people being Muslims was either ignored or covered up or not treated really like a religion. And that eventually led to the book that I wrote that, I think several of you at least are aware of, the Muslim American Fight for Social Justice from Civil Rights to Black Lives Matter. But I remember doing a lot of research. I had a pretty big bibliography there, and your books were included, among many others. But even then, that was the only book I remember reading that actually covered all of these different Black Muslims groups, like for the more science temple, and you just talked about Garvey and obviously the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, and so on and so on. I couldn't find any other academic work that talked about that history, that you particularly um, pointed out. And I remember thinking at the time that seemed rather odd. I mean, there were definitely, of course, I'll forget some of the names of them now, but there were certainly books about Islam in America and uh, different scholars that had covered that, but not to the extent that you did, and even the fact that, as you just said, that you talked to all these different members of these groups, and I felt you were approaching it as a historian. Obviously, you were Muslim, but you were looking to see what each of these groups' beliefs were, and how they developed their faith and what activities they were involved in. So I think, I mean, even to this day, there doesn't seem to be still a book, an academic book or history that expanded on what you wrote about. And again, maybe I'm missing something, but there's this seemed to be just a real lack of interest, certainly on the academic front, or maybe by the Muslim community in general. Part of my idea in my book was, well, okay, everybody knows about the Nation of Islam, and they know about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and they know about Minister Farrakhan, and they typically don't know anything about Imam Nabi Muhammad, but that's about it. And the fact that our masjid, does those Chicago Black Muslim history tours, I mean, those are great because all these people come from different communities, and they had no idea that this history is all over Chicago, and they're always kind of shocked. So I guess and this is more of a commentary, but I'm interested in what you think are some of the main causes, other than racism, causes for this ignoring of the Black Muslim history in America.
Well, I think there are several, let's say, primary causes. One is that knowledge of Islam has been in America since its inception. With Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and a lot of James Madison, a lot of people. So knowledge of Islam has been here. Okay. There even is a little bit in some of the Federalist Papers talking about the fact that America was seeking to be pluralist, and it didn't mean pluralist and it's going to let some of everybody in. It means we're going to let some Protestants of different churches and Catholics in. They would have to consider the Muslims, Mohammedans, right? So it's been here, but always, characterized as overseas. Okay. When immigrants came, And each ethnic group has its own definition of Islam because you accept that culturally. They made African American Muslims a footnote. And African American Muslims have not been worried enough about that to change that. So when you pick up many books on Islam in America, and they're not a whole bunch, we're a footnote. You know, it's a little bit about, well, after slavery, some of the slaves were Muslims, and then in the early late 1920s and early 1930s, these groups come, case closed. And then Warith Muhammad did a Martin Luther King thing and made all the African American Muslims who appreciated and followed his orations palpable to Americans. And that's not what Warith did either. But nevertheless, that's all you get. When some immigrants write about us, we're literally a footnote. I'm just running through my head books I've read. Even when ISPU, and I used to sit on their advisory board complaining that the way they do their surveys is by phone. And so when they look in a phone, if you don't have a recognizable Muslim name, you don't get included in the survey. So the surveys really are not about American Muslims. They're about certain ethnic groups of American Muslims. So that we're becoming a footnote. I'm currently working with Oxford on editing a research set of encyclopedias, because it's huge, on Islam in America. It has been a fight to get writers who could contribute to certain subjects, or we would again be absent. Do you see what I mean? I mean, just absent. We don't respond to things in the news. So therefore, we're absent. We're just erased. Come on, y'all.
I have a question. What similarities did you find between the communities, the different communities that you researched? What was some
similarities?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And Tariq has his hand up.
Loyalty. I think all the members in all of the communities have an abiding love for Islam. You know, their interpretations may be different, but an abiding love. A love for Allah, you know, and his last prophet. There are beyond that, they wouldn't want to be anybody else or anything else. I think they see the benefits of being Muslim, you know, because they work, even though some have fallen, they work on keeping their bodies clean. They work when they can on issues of justice across the board. Those are the largest, and I think most important similarities. Thank you for that.
Tariq had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Tariq, there you are.
Yes. I'll pop on.
Our glasses and all.
Let the Imam go first. I might not need to speak after him.
Cut it. So you began to touch on a question that I have, which is regard to the issues of justice. And, you know, because our society has been one where race has been the justification for injustice and oppression, our all of our movements, in particular religion, has lent towards, you know, liberation and seeking justice. What are some of the have you found that commitment or awareness to be varied across the different community expressions of Islam? And is that something that well, I'll stop there. I don't need to give a two-tiered question. Yeah, but
let me make a blanket statement.
mm.
If you don't write, what you say doesn't exist. It is for the moment you said it, and then it's gone. Okay. So when I read the legal journals and stuff, I don't see us. I don't see an opinion of ours. I don't see a critique of ours. Like, for example, Trump is, what do you call it, exonerating all his buddies, but there's no demand from Muslims about exonerating folks with misdemeanors. And that has to be in writing, you know, and there are plenty of others who would join us in that effort, but it's not there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I'll turn my camera on for a minute, but I'll get.
Oh, there it is.
Yes. I like to lay in the cut, as they say. You know, as I reflected on my history of learning about Muslims in America, which, you know, goes back a few decades now, I see some consistencies from my personal experience with what you experience on a different level, you know, in terms institutionally and academically. And but I also see that as part of a longer trend of always minimizing it, and if at all possible, denying the efforts and the progress of African Americans, because it's, you know, it seems to be part and parcel of what holds America up is the denial of our existence and our contributions. And I guess one of the things that really surprised me when I started getting interested in Islam is how that is finding its way into Islam before I even became a part of the Nation of Islam. I mean, there were immigrant and even African Americans who thought of themselves as, at the time, they were using the term Orthodox Islam.
There's no orthodoxy.
I know, that's my point. But Orthodox was a substitute for the word legitimate.
Yeah.
Unconsciously or subconsciously, because I'm saying, okay, if I wanted to just be quote unquote religious, I could have just stayed in the church and been a whole lot more just religious than making this decision. So I think, I guess my question to you is, because one of the first things Elijah Muhammad did, and one of his highest priorities, was always having some control of some kind of media. I don't know if people still articulate that to themselves. We have Muslim Journal, you know, and even Minister Farrakhan, who definitely describes himself as part of the tradition and the legacy of Elijah Muhammad, he has a paper. We do media. So I guess I'm asking about a conclusion. There's some of it that we are still fighting the the idea that America, the concept of Americans, people who see themselves as American, they're extremely dependent on this idea that there's a certain lack of legitimacy that quote unquote free Black people have in America. And that's my question, I guess.
No, you're absolutely Right, and even more so inside the Muslim community.
Mhm.
The not like Orthodox means to say legitimate. I'm reading a paper this morning where this man keeps saying Orthodox. There's no Orthodox. There is no Pope. Who's your Pope?
Mhm.
But anyway, I think that many of us, myself included, I mean, before I can write an article, it has to have, I'm not even going to say it, a number of drafts. Okay. And folk are not writing. They are writing self-published books where the writing it's not what they have to say. Didn't have an editor, right?
Mhm.
So they become books that can't be used in classrooms.
Mhm.
It can't be used in policy studies. There's so many places that can't be used. One place. The other thing is that their world has centered itself as the know and be all of Islamic studies. And it is one of the places. But if I were to ask, how many of you have looked at Chinese Islam?
Hmm.
Chinese Islam uses Confucian stuff as its base to analyze, interpret, and choose from Arab stuff.
Mhm.
Okay. Which is how cultures come to Islam. Us coming from a particular kind of both psychological and physical slavery. Some of us, those that joined the Moorish Science Temple, perhaps, definitely those that joined the Nation of Islam. And this is where, not to the exclusion of other communities, but where I give the nation a hell of a lot of credit. Elijah Muhammad realized he had to clean up a vessel before he could put something else in it. So things that people in texts that I've read, Little X and this, that, and the other, are complaining about how the sacrifices that folks had to make. Some of those sacrifices in nation building were necessary. I'm not a judge of that. But the staving off of influences of other cultures who treated, no, thought of us continually as slaves, right? Was a good thing. But I don't think people felt, and I still don't think they do, competent enough, because what we do is run off to study Arab stuff. Arabs are a very small percentage of the Muslim world. And, when China, Malaysia, Indonesia, they respectful of the Arab world, but that is not their culture. Even though the Arabs have tried to infiltrate it. So I think that we need to find a way to be present. I'm willing to help anybody and get helped in return because every time you help somebody, you get more in return than you gave out. But it is important that we realize that just talking is wonderful. Putting it down in print, even with the study of Imam Muhammad, Clyde knows this. I tried, and I'm still trying, and we're still working, I hope, to bring together as much as I could get about the Imam. Because there's no text on the Imam. Most don't know him. They don't have a clue. Okay? Because he wasn't talking about how he was going to do something to white folks or implying he was going to do something to white folks. But his thought scattered. here, there, and everywhere, when put together, is very important. In the Dar Islam movement, there were many imams because imams rotated, and were elected every 3 years. But the spirit and the focus of the Dar, very important. Even the Moorish Science Temple that I got a message from recently, folks are saying, okay, we can move to Salat, a formal acknowledgement of Ramadan. But I'm not getting on that immigrant bandwagon because they know it's a threat to their very existence, but they haven't figured out what gives them legs. And for much of, I'm going to say, the Muslim world, we're still wannabes. Not quite there.
When you
Yes,
say
sir.
wannabes, you're saying we are, that's how we see ourselves, or that's how others see us?
That's how others see us.
Okay.
Certainly not how we see ourselves. We're giving up
I
too
figured
much in this
you're right. I
journey
just want to make that
to
clear,
Islam.
very clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. Who is Sadiq? Not there, just listening. Latifa. Okay, I can't make people talk with me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I came in late, so I don't feel qualified to be saying a whole lot of stuff. But in listening to the dismissal of our efforts and our growth and development by others, because we don't dismiss it ourselves, and we work hard to be seen doing good things in the communities. The wannabe part is, to me, really what the Arabs are doing. They want to be white themselves. So
Absolutely.
in their journey, they have gotten lost. They may have the Arabic, but they don't have the Quranic concepts that they need from the Arab grammar to move their own communities farther. We're developing in our community thinkers, thanks to Imam W.D. Muhammad and Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who separated us so that we could think. And we are thinkers. And if we continue on this road, we will get to the destination that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for us. We don't have to take on somebody else's head on our body. We don't have to do any of that. All we have to do is tap into the gems that Allah has given us. Allah has given everything to us. If we are believers, the angels will work on our behalf. But we have to submit and know that Allah has our backs. And that's how we move forward. I really appreciate what I've heard because that's so true. They dismiss everything we do. It's kind of funny in reflecting on the election, which who wants to think about that? How they jumped on Biden for everything that came out of his mouth. They jumped on Kamala. Even the Muslims voted for Donald J. Trump, the man that told them in advance their desire for the Gaza was to make it a resort. And he's moving forward on that. They couldn't hear the man when he stood before them and told you, I do not care about you. I just want your vote. So, the thing is getting back to being able to think which is a true blessing from Allah. What we need to do is what you saying we need to be in these spaces, and you're absolutely correct. But we have to know that we belong in them.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Thank you so much.
Brother Bill,
Well,
where his hand raised.
I'm going to see if I can get a second question in here. Well, the first point I wanted to make is that I did a history of the FBI presentation for the masjid. I don't know, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I needed updated. And one of the things that I noticed in doing the research was very interesting is that the uh, Marcus Garvey and the Moorish Science Temple, and I'm sure Dr. Aminah, you probably know about this. That was actually the first FBI's interaction with an American Muslim group. And of course, their interaction was all about surveillance and being very suspicious of, non-mainstream religions. And of course, they saw Marcus Garvey as a spokesman for Black nationalism and that type of thing. So one of the things I'm saying is a little bit going back to what I said before, that um, black black Muslims, however they have been formed, um, have been a target, by the government for a very long time, and obviously, still are. And this is way before 9/11. So I think that kind of atmosphere has a lot to do with making sure that there's not Black Muslim spokespeople and in the media and some of the things that you've been talking about. The other last quick thing that I've seen, and I'm just curious about your feelings about that. Um, I come from more of a very activist background, even before I became Muslim. And one of the things I've noticed in the past, few years is that the let's call it the overall Muslim community has rarely turned out for um, what I would call, like the Black Lives Matter movement was a good example. There was one big protest that the Muslim communities around Chicago uh, got involved in. But even what we've been saying about Trump and the new Trump administration, I haven't seen a lot of uh, just Muslim communities in general um, either coming up with plans or supporting, Latinx immigrants and even their own immigrants. And, as you said, I think earlier, making statements, opposing this and resisting this. Um, and overall, I mean, there's
okay,
certainly a
Bill,
community that's been through this. But go ahead. I'm
let
sorry.
me hold that. I'm going to answer you, and I'm going to get Bashir, and I don't know who Bashir is. Bashir,
Yes.
can't see
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah. I don't want you to see me right now, if you don't mind. But I came in late too. But I'd like to make some comments or observations on what you have given us in some areas. And you were talking about how cultures, and specifically Chinese cultures, and how their cultures influence al-Islam. Um, and in the Quran, it states that the Quran also um, looks back and gives us the best of cultures and the best of civilizations that have came from the past. And it also talks about prophets that were known and unknown. And Confucius could be uh, possibly in that category, because the knowledge within there would, and I'm not that familiar with Confucius. I have read some of it, but relates to what Allah gave us in the Quran. And Allah in the Quran also tells us in that respect on culture, I made you tribes and nations that you might acknowledge each other, not despise each other. And my last comment is the one you had concerning Imam Wardi Muhammad, that people don't know him, and there may be some confusion there. And Imam Wardi Muhammad uh, told his imams, he said, I need some of you to cross-reference my lectures, because I may have said one thing in one area that may have contradicted something I said in another area, or may have related to one thing in one area and one thing in the other area. So those are my comments and observations. Thank you.
Thank you. Imam Tariq?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm here. I was in the chat. I didn't know I was gonna have time to actually make this point, but so what's been shared thus far is really it's got me thinking about the in particular the African American Muslim community being in a trade deficit, a spiritual as well as a material deficit in terms of our relationships with other people, other communities. And this all is, this of course is grounded in the work of many who've come before us. You mentioned the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Imam Wardi Muhammad, and many others whose focus was trying to instill a sense of self-worth. And that when we go into these relationships, that we are not the only one. We're not just looking to receive, but recognizing that we have something of value to also share. And to your point, as I shut myself down, the writing piece of it, that really that struck a chord with me. And even if they are speeches, turning those speeches into matter of fact, I think you and I we talked about this before. You know, about having the khutbahs transcribed. You know, using those as a
and those things can be Rashid, if you'll let us go on for a moment.
Yes,
those things can be edited and put into articles. And I think that the what Bashir said led me back to something, and also what Bill said. One of them is that growth, you don't have to defend growth. Communities come to Islam wherever it is they are across the world. They don't jettison, get rid of all that made them who they are. Their ancestors are important. What their ancestors gave them are important, right? But if, I don't think we realize how much the world understands us as descendants of slaves. And the world doesn't understand descendants of slaves coming to stand on their own 2 feet. We ourselves don't understand us coming to stand on our own 2 feet. You see? I mean, myself and only a few others always find ourselves, and I get ticked off at it, so I drag people when I can, to being the only African American Muslim present. And whether it's policy, we were present in Malaysia when there was an issue with Mahathir, who was the then president, jailing a Muslim who wanted to put religion back in their Islamic practice. We have to be present. We also have to write. Anybody, and Tariq, as the resident imam, needs to pull together a little think tank. It doesn't have to be 20 people, it could be 5 dedicated, committed people. You know, I drug Clyde out of his favorite chair because I wanted to talk about Imam Warfdi Muhammad. And I was sick of the fact that every time I turned around, I either was naysaying a book on Farrakhan or mute on a book on Imam Warfdi Muhammad. Okay? I mean, it's one thing to keep, you know, all I hear is, well, the Imam did this, but you haven't written a viable text that people can use. I am more than willing to help anybody write that text.
Okay.
And Imam Tariq El-Amin, and I don't know the other Imam, but have given some rousing khutbahs. Rousing. Well, when you gonna write it down? When will we see this? And you know, guess I'll talk to you later, Aminah.
Thank you.
So the name of it is African American Islam. This is the book we've been referencing, correct? Someone asked in the chat.
That is the very first book I wrote. I think Routledge hasn't returned my owner's rights to me yet because it's still selling in Europe. So, I mean, I love the royalties, but I want my rights too. I think it's still available with a different cover on Amazon.
Yes,
yeah.
I think it's also available on Barnes and Noble.
Honey, I don't know.
No, I've been looking it up while we were talking. That's why I'm
Okay.
speaking. I wouldn't say
It's
also available on Barnes.
The book I wrote on transnational Muslims gave some vocabulary to using a term other than immigrants, because many of the immigrants coming here, we're not their first home. Europe was their first home, and we're the second one. And when we look around us to see how are they able to start all these institutions and these organizations? Well, many of them have money from home and don't have a viable way here. So organizations started 20, 25 years ago, and it now provides livelihood. And then we go work for them.
Well, Brother Bill put in the comments that Dr. Ramadan and he are working on a book of his cookbots and presentations.
I would love to see it. And you have to remember that not only are we underappreciated, we have to write something. When you're writing spiritual stuff, that's different than an academic book. It might find its way in a seminary. But when people want to know, and I know Dr. Ramadan knows because I've heard him on Study on Islam, when people want to know your contributions, as Tariq and Bill were talking about, I want to see, you know, when a few years ago, well, a couple of years ago, I was doing this book on Muslims and American Muslims and COVID. Getting African Americans to contribute was almost zero. They didn't have to be scholars of anything. They had to talk about their experiences with COVID. You know,
Yes, ma'am.
and every time we put out an ask, sometimes this group and others have to respond.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I want to thank you so very much for your our discussion. It was very, very much enjoyed by, I believe, all of our audience, and it's been an honor having you on our Talim Sunday Talim talk. And I
It's
want
been
to
an honor to be here.
all praise to Allah. All
Hope
praise
to
to
see you again soon.